Does this front line move? Very.
Very little. In reality, you have to imagine, is the year 2024. The Russians have advanced about 4,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of a small French department. In 1,000 days, they seized 1% of Ukrainian territory and suffered nearly 1 million military casualties. We're talking about astronomical numbers, proven losses and proven advances. Yes, they're making progress, but it's minimal and ridiculous. At their current pace, taking the Donbass would still take another 2 to 2.5 years. We know that militarily and economically, Russia cannot sustain the current pace. That's why there's pressure on civilians. Militarily, they can't succeed, so they aim to make the civilian population collapse. Fortunately for the Ukrainians, they really have a very strong resilience, and on the contrary, it actually tends to motivate them. And
that's exactly the question. Anonymous, I don't see a name. Can Ukrainians defend themselves militarily alone? So, today,
they are doing it. They are fortunate to have support provided to them, which is still very, very far from what could be done. We give our military surplus and old equipment to the Ukrainians instead of scrapping it, and they do wonders with it. So the reality is that alone, without our support, by the end of 2022, in the fall of 2022, the Ukrainians, they freed 20,000 square kilometers before getting missiles, tanks, and planes. If we had helped them then, the war would be over and we'd have peace now. Today there's a sort of balance. Russia, to succeed in accelerating and taking territory, there must be 3 times more attackers than defenders. You need 3 times the firepower. The Russians can't do this because Ukraine's industrial output is rising. Ukrainians now produce 55% of their daily used weapons. Europe supplies 25% the United States, 20% with smaller amounts from Qatar, Australia, Japan and others. So overall, the Ukrainians on their own are able to hold on. But you say that
even though they could alone, they can hold on, but alone they can't win. They need, if the
United States tomorrow, the United States has 8,400 battle tanks, including 3,000 in reserve. If Trump decides to give 1,000, that would change the situation, and it could
lead to a victory. That could
enable turning the tables, making breakthroughs and reclaiming territory. If we only give enough to maintain, the front will remain mostly stable. The possibility of
Russia losing this war is still possible, in your opinion, today? That scenario still exists if a large amount of
maneuvers is provided to Ukraine, and the only country that has them is the United States. So if the United States decides the Ukrainians could win, this war shows that our title
of the show is really well chosen because we wrote both that Putin was going wild and that Trump was arming Ukraine. And I come back to our news of the day that you may not have seen, but it's still very important. Donald Trump approved a major sale of 3,350 long-range air-to-surface missiles and equipment to Ukraine, totaling $825 million, or just over 700 million euros. Before continuing,
These Ukraine videos are sponsored, but all sponsor funds support charities in Ukraine. And our partner? Come on, let's go back there. There are missiles.
Extended range attack munition. Extended range attack munition is a next-gen weapon. You can explain it better than I can. Can it change the course of the war or at least play an important role? No, actually it...
Keep in mind there are 2 wars. The Zero Frontline War, which needs more small drones and armored vehicles, etc. Helicopters, fighter jets, and then you have long-distance warfare, and that's a long-distance war. How do we make Russia stop attacking? We want to force them economically. These are Ukrainian sanctions against Russia. It's about reducing oil production capacity by 17% for the month of August. That's huge, but let's explain. So that's it.
That's the goal, because Ukrainians have different types of ammunition available. We know this is a drone war, and throughout the summer, they targeted mainly the refineries, but also the oil depots. And now there's even this figure that's been given to us. So there are several estimates. Platts SIPI Global and Reuters report Russia lost 17% of its refined oil production. Reuters states 13%, but it's still significant. It's so significant that
Russia, Vladimir Putin signed a decree to ban the sale and export of refined oil. They have shortages in the country. Until October, they shouldn't export them anymore. That's what Trump relies on when providing his long-range weapons. The ARAM's range is 1,000 kilometers. So that's 3 times farther than the maximum range of the missiles that had been supplied until now. They're set to supply nearly 3,000 over 2 years, with production starting soon. We're discussing the end, so starting in October, American weapons will start arriving in large numbers, with a range that's much greater than what they had until now, but above all, military power. Ukrainian kamikaze drones, once carrying 50 or 100 kuldi, and ranges over 1,000 kilometers, can now carry 500 kuldi. Alongside this, United States provide weapon. Ukrainians have also made announcements. 1 ton at 3,000 kilometers for the Flamingo. And so in the end, you have this accumulation of news because the Ukrainians understand very well that on the front lines, they will never be able to turn the tables to liberate their territory. But making the economy collapse so that Russia stops trying to push, that's their goal now. That's why they're developing long-range weapons. I also have a few more details I couldn't share earlier. On the Le Flamingo platform, we know its range and capabilities. We're currently producing 1 unit per day. The goal is to produce 7 per day starting in October, giving us a very interesting industrial shield. Farpoint also makes a drone cruise missile called FP-1. It weighs 50 kilo and has a range of 1,200 to 1,400 kilometers, depending on the adjustable payload. They already produce nearly 100 per day and are stockpiling them. Alongside that, you also have the Neptune missile. You remember the missile that sank the ship, the Moskva? It was an anti-ship missile. The Ukrainians had developed a surface-to-surface version, which allows them to launch long-range cruise missiles without needing to use aircraft, which is very convenient once again. They used it in a surface-to-surface role, such as destroying an S-400 air defense system in Crimea, considered the world's most effective. They've released a new version that can hit targets over 1,000 kilometers away, and they're ramping up industrial production. So the Ukrainians, they have small drones. 300 kilometers is easy to intercept. Cruise missiles now travel 800 to 900 kilometers and can reach up to 3,000 kilometers. And they also have ballistic missiles. A ballistic missile goes very, very high. You don't need the same interceptors. It's harder to detect and intercept. And they have a system called Krim-2. During the Soviet era, there was a missile called Grom, and it was designed by Ukrainians. Ukraine made up 1/3 of the Soviet Union's military industrial power. And so, when the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics collapsed, they continued to work on some modernization projects. And the Jerome became the Krim-2 notably, with funding from Saudi Arabia. Developed and tested in 2014, its first operational field test occurred in May 2025. And they have also just announced the mass production of this ballistic missile. Ballistic missile, 555, 500 KDs, 500 kilometer, Mach 5 over 5,000 kilometer range. So yet another element, which makes us think that October, between American weapons, new Ukrainian productions, and what they were producing in the past, and then this ramp up in different areas. So starting in October, there will really be another acceleration of suffering that the Ukrainians will inflict on the economy, on the infrastructure, on the Russian factories. Imagine if by then the Russians lost a factory or vital infrastructure daily. Obviously, they realize that in the long run, continuing this war will cost them much more than what they can hope to gain by continuing to attack Ukraine. The goal is indeed to bring about a collapse of Russia's economic capacity to wage war. That doesn't mean the army will collapse and Ukraine will retake its territory. Unfortunately for them, it means we have to force Russia to come back like it did in 2014, 2015, 2014, 2015. It invaded Ukraine for the first time in the Donbass. Throughout 2015, it violated the Minsk agreements. It eventually ended up capturing, in particular, the Donetsk airport. And then it stops without a ceasefire, without official peace. So here, the goal is to make sure that Russia can no longer financially continue to move forward. Thus, it will be accomplished through the economy and its missiles. Yes, it may help peace, but not a Ukrainian victory. Could Ukraine strike harder at the...
Russia, that's Bernard's question. I'll add, in the short term. Oh yes, very clearly. First of all, because the...
different missiles that have been announced. In fact, both of the protagonists, before meeting Donald Trump, wanted to lay their cards on the table. Russia launched marketing offensives, sending a few dozen men to plant a flag, though they got trapped behind. It gave an impression that really made us worried, but it was actually bogus. And on their side, the Ukrainians showed more their ability to strike deep. All through August, all those deep strikes were real operational, economic and military successes, hitting infrastructure, factories and ammunition depots. They're warning Putin, tomorrow will be worse. Stop now, or it will get much worse. I think we'll see this Ukrainian acceleration starting in October, because that's when everything is coming together. There you go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very soon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you very soon.